like 5 years ago, Google did a big thing on this about emotional safety on the teams, and the leaders that could create emotional safety for their team members are the ones that had the best retention and productivity. And so these concepts of emotional connection, but more so emotional safety, absolutely apply to the business world.
Let's impact some men today. I think we're gonna do a great job.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where I'm your host, Ted Phaeton, and we are all here to connect men in pursuit of their potential. I encourage you to join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. And also, before we jump into the conversation, I want to ask you to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you can get a new episode each and every single week. And to the men who are looking to take things to the next level in terms of their personal growth, I want to encourage you to check out the Noble Knights Mastermind group. It's free to join, and there you can find a group of men who are all elevating their capacity for life. Join us to find the support, accountability, and the mentorship you need to achieve your goals. And it's all about surrounding yourself with like-minded men, because iron sharpens iron. And today we are getting our capacity filled. We are getting our wind in our sails from my guest, who is men's coach and acclaimed author of the groundbreaking book, The Masculine in Relationship, GS Youngblood, joining us on the podcast today. GS, thanks for being on, brother.
Ed, thanks for having me on. I appreciate what you're out doing in the world. And I love what you said, iron sharpens iron. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. So before we jump into our conversation, I'm going to allow you to be our whetstone as we start sharpening up a little bit. And please introduce yourself, talk to the audience and the guys watching on YouTube as well. And then we can hop into our conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I think most people know me as an author, and having written The Masculine in Relationship and my other book, The Art of Embodiment. But I spend every day coaching men how to have more fulfilling relationships. And for me, it all started back in a divorce 15, 16 years ago. And that was pretty shattering at the time. And I was married to a strong woman, didn't know how to be with a strong woman. And so I knew there had to be a better way. When that fell apart, I knew there had to be a better way. And it had to come from within me, rather than sort of waiting for your partner to change. Um, had to come from within me. So I've been on a 15 plus year journey, both as a student of studying with well-known teachers, and from not only from masculine, feminine polarity world, but also outside of that. But
Yeah.
also being in a long-term relationship. I mean, you know this as well as anybody. Like, can you actually do relationship? And I've had the honor of being with the same person for 11 years now, and seeing what creates more connection and more openness, and seeing what shuts us down or triggers us both, and really, quite frankly, seeing what works and what doesn't. And that's the culmination of that is what I put into the book, and also what I bring into the coaching every day with the men that I work with.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And I've been very transparent on this podcast, and I'm sure the audience knows a lot about myself. But cultivating that relationship before we hit record, we chatted a little bit. I told you I have a little baby girl, and I'm married to my wife, and it's amazing to see where our relationship is now, because I know that we worked on it in order to get it where it is. And I'm having a great time as a new dad and as a husband. And it is fantastic. Sure, there's its challenges, but I tell people I'm enjoying this ride, and I recommend it for anybody so far. But you mentioned the masculine in relationships and being with a strong woman. And I know a lot of ears from the listeners will peak at hearing that introduction. On, I guess, unpeel the onion a little bit, pull back the curtains into what you mean by the masculine in a relationship, what that looks like. Let's start surface level for anybody who might not have been introduced to this work before, and start there in terms of what that looks like and what we mean when we say masculine in the relationship and how that could be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, what does it mean to be in your masculine while you're in a relationship? And there's a lot of men's work out there that so some of it's kind of like, hey, this alpha bro stuff, and like, how can I be the alpha in the room? And that's, that there's some good things in that, actually, believe it or not. Like, the clarity and the certainty and the forward momentum of somebody like that is actually pretty good. Now, if it's all about you, then it comes off as either assholish or misogynistic or anything like that. But if you're actually inclusive of those that are important to you in terms of your leadership, you can get a lot from that alpha bro stuff. The problem is it often ends up being more the narcissistic kind of, more that younger form of masculinity. There's a lot of good men's work out there that's really about sovereignty and being with other men, and iron sharpens iron, and that's actually really powerful work, and I really support that. There's one more step. It's like, okay, how do you take all that and be in relationship? Because being with your brothers is very different than being with your woman. And if you bring a little bit too much of that masculine in kind of the way you are with your guy friends, it's not going to feel good. So there's a whole set of relational skills that I think the holistically masculine man needs to be successful in relationship. And that's a lot of what is woven into the work in the book itself. And here's what I say. I say, in the book, there's this thing I call the masculine blueprint. It's my three-part framework for what I think a healthy masculine is. And so if you, number one, if you get grounded, and number two, if you lead more in the relationship, and number three, if you build emotional connection and safety with her, if you do those three things and fully embody those, you'll be a man that's fully in his masculine and is very successful in the relational space with your woman. And that's where I think life gets fun. It's kind of like what you were talking about. You're having a lot of fun because you're successful at the relational parts. That's when life gets really fun, when you and your partner are really, really vibing, and you have
Yeah.
like a natural polarity. That's part of this. You're bringing your leadership. She's bringing her own form of leadership, and relationships just work a lot better when you're in that mode and when you have those skills and capacities. So that's kind of the big overview of what I see as a healthy masculine.
Yeah, and I'd love to kind of dissect that blueprint a little bit on this podcast, but just to reiterate what you're saying, it's amazing, and I get emotional nowadays when I think of the gratitude. I try and tap into that feeling of gratitude a lot, and it's great when I can tell people, I have peace in the home, and when I go out into the world, it could be chaotic. I can handle a lot of things. I got to make a lot of choices. People will depend on me. My phone rings. They need something, but when I get home, there is a sense of peace. And not to say that I don't have obligations and responsibilities in the house. Of course I do. But when those are tended to, I can come home and I find peace. And that's been such a beautiful thing to have. Um, did you have something to say to that?
Yeah, like, look, guys, to the men out there, I say, when your woman feels you grounded, when your woman feels your leadership, and when your woman feels emotionally connected to you, you're going to have peace at home. You're going to come home. She's going to be softer. She's going to be more open, and all of those things. Versus if you're a guy that's like a lot of men, you're super defensive. You abdicate your leadership. You have no idea what emotional connection looks like or how to form it. Of course, you come home and there's not peace. So you need to be able to as a you take the you need, let's see, how do I want to say this? You need to bring leadership, but you also need to know how to feed her needs and her emotional needs. And when you feed those needs, um, then that's when you have peace at home. And that's
Yeah.
really what guys want. We want ease. We want to serve our women. Guys want to serve. We want to do, but we want ease most of all because it's hard for us when she's upset. Like we often have no idea what to do. We freeze up like a deer in headlights, and then things just get worse from there. So it's like, guys, you can create this sense of peace that Ted talks about. You can create that in your own life if you bring these skills to bear.
So let's jump into that masculine blueprint that you mentioned, and I want to start with the grounded piece,
Mhm.
and help kind of give some of the guys listening some tactical approaches to cultivating that piece.
Yeah.
Um, Starting with the groundedness, what is that? What does it look like? How do we embody that?
Yeah, what we're talking about is your nervous system is settled. Like we all know those times when we feel kind of jacked up. We're either triggered or maybe we're just overly compressed because there's too much going on, too much stress. Your nervous system is just on high alert, and you're going to be reactive. You're going to be defensive. You're going to be very susceptible to her upset when she comes at you when your nervous system is jacked up. And so guys that are on a growth path often go out and read a book. And we like to kind of listen to an audible book, but you're only getting mental knowledge. That mental knowledge is going to leave you the minute your nervous system gets jacked. And so what you have to do is the physical practices so that you can cultivate a more relaxed and grounded and settled nervous system. And that's where I start talking about embodiment work. And anybody that's listened to me anywhere or read anything, I'm usually talking about embodiment work, because embodiment is the number one thing a guy can do to build his masculine core, and it is certainly the number one thing you can do to settle your nervous system, which is where it all starts. And so I tell guys, like, you need to have a daily practice. It's breath work, it's meditation, there's some movement in these types of embodiment that I teach. Also, lots of other people teach it as well. So that's my best advice is, guys, have a daily practice. If you've got 30 minutes a day, that's awesome. I do realize that a lot of guys can't muster 30 minutes a day. If you can do 10 minutes a day, gosh, if even 5 minutes a day of something that's really structured and consistent, like, it's a lot better than nothing. So that's my first advice to guys is get grounded and do it through a daily practice of embodiment.
Yeah, I call it a daily discipline in which I actually posted not too long ago. What are your non-negotiables? Um, and that's been huge and helpful in terms of giving me that baseline and something to move forward with. Um, from the grounded piece, how do we embody that leadership, or how do we lean into leadership from a
Yeah.
grounded state?
Yeah. When you're not grounded, when you're kind of triggered and you're nervous, and you're in your nice guy energy and just trying to like keep the peace and make everybody
Mhm.
happy.
Not to derail really quick, explain nice guy energy really quick for some folks who might not be familiar.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was going to describe. Nice guy energy is, number one, he's a guy that first pretends he has no needs. He's just like, hey, whatever, whatever you need. And they think they're creating peace and harmony in the world and being good men. Well, the problem is usually underneath they're getting more and more resentful because their needs are never met because they pretend they have no needs. And so this nice guy, he's nice and pleasing. On the inside, he's seething. And guess what? The feminine can feel that. She can feel the pleaser part and she can feel the resentful part. And so that's often what nice guys are doing. Their radar, this is the radar, it's out scanning for danger and what the safe thing to do and say is. And they're trying to weave that path. And so nobody ever gets upset with them. And the problem is that is a killer of attraction with their woman. I mean, this as well as anybody. The women feel that, and it is not attractive. So that's who the nice guy is.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Phaeton here, host of the Modern Man podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals.
Check out themodernmanpodcast.com.
So taking that back to the question about leadership, we talked about nice guys having their radar outwards. Well, with leadership starts with inner clarity. Like, you have to know what you need, what you want, what your instincts say the moment calls for, and also folding in what she needs as well. Problem is, with your radar out there, you don't have any that pointed inward to say, okay, what's my inner wisdom? And so guys without any inner clarity, they're not leading, they're reacting to find the safe thing to do, but they're not leading at all. And so that's how those, nice guy syndrome and lack of leadership tie together, because their awareness is outward rather than starting inward. And I think that's the first thing that guys can do is like take this and just pause for a second, take a breath. And it's like, okay, what do I actually think is needed in this moment? What does the moment call for? What do I need? What does she needs? And let's boil it down to the simplest example of this, that's overly simplified, of course, is like, instead of like, hey babe, where do you want to go to dinner tonight? It's like, you actually pause for a second and think, what do I want? Oh, that sushi place I've driven by 5 times. I've totally wanted to go there. Baby, would you be up for hitting that sushi place tonight? Because I've always wanted to go there. So that's the difference. And I know my example is overly simplified, but it, it's just like, is your immediate reaction outward, or do you pause and just look inward and then offer up that clarity externally in the form of structure and leadership? And that's what men have lost these
Mm.
days, is that ability just to check in with oneself first and trust your own wisdom before presenting it externally to her.
How can how can that leadership or even the groundedness show up in conflict?
Yeah, when she comes at you with some intensity because she's feeling emotionally tweaked in some way, you immediately either try to stop her from feeling that way by defending, explaining, withdrawing, blaming, etc. You're trying to get her to stop feeling that way, when all she actually wants is for you to feel her and just receive and make some space for it. So that, reacting to her and trying to get her to stop is not leadership. What leadership is feeling her, which is what she's craving, and then creating some emotional resonance with her to help her carry this emotional load, and then that's going to ground her. And once you start to help her ground her nervous system to co-regulate, then she can come back to kind of the present moment, and she'll be more rational and able to talk about what actually happened, rather than just kind of existing on that emotional plane, which is hard for a lot of guys to deal with. So that's what comes up for me when you ask me that.
Yeah, and I would imagine, I believe the third part was leading into the safety aspect of things, and this seems as though it's the one, two, three leading towards that
Yeah,
conclusion.
yeah, yeah. In this realm of leadership, which is, as you point out, the second element of the blueprint, there's this concept of emotional leadership. And so it's not just, we don't try to talk her out of being upset or hide from it. We actually step into it bravely and lead her into a better place of more connection. And as you brought up, more emotional safety. And that's a powerful tool for a man to have. And I think a lot of guys are like, oh, what is this namby-pamby emotional bullshit you want me to do? It's like, well, let me tell you something that's really true. It is not masculine to be fighting with your woman. So if you think you're just going to be all hardcore and alpha and not have these emotional skills, you're wrong. You're going to still be fighting. So you'll be the alpha that's there fighting with your woman, while the guy that has these emotional resonance and regulation skills is not fighting. He's having a good time with his woman. Which one's more powerful? I think we all know it's the latter.
Yeah, and even for a lot of our listeners who are uh, business owners scaling up a business or competitors in their own realm, you compete so much better when things are peaceful at home.
Oh, oh well, I mean, that was just a big can of worms you just opened. It's so true. Like, it's so hard to crush it out in the business world when, as you said, when things are going poorly at home or you're fighting a lot. I mean, I can attest to that when the relationship was going downhill, way back when. I mean, I'd literally go in the office, close my door, and I was just an emotional mess. I wasn't getting shit done because of that dynamic. So yeah, I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. I want to go back to the embodiment part, because now that we can understand the blueprint and the behavior of that groundedness, then leading to the leadership, and that can help build an area and an environment of safety. That embodiment, because a lot of us talk about the work we need to do, and embodiment seems to be the start. So, why is it important for us to heal from the anxiety, trauma, and practice embodiment? What does that process look like?
Well, why is it important? Because when you're triggered, all you're trying to do is assuage the wound that's flaring up, and you're not actually in a relational space. So your woman comes at you with that upset, and she really wants you to hear her and feel her, but all you can do is protect your own ego, or protect yourself from the anxiety of your own wounds flaring up, and then she feels utterly left alone. And when you're triggered, you're not in a space of a lot of choice. You're just playing out a script, or out of the wounding, or out of the habituation. You're not actually seeing things for what they really are in the moment. You're sort of seeing the scary projection on top of them. So you're not actually very here, very now, very choiceful. And that's not powerful. Like, somebody who's not here and not reacting to what's actually happening. It doesn't seem very choiceful. Like that's not powerful. That's not a powerful man. Powerful man
Mhm.
is the one who's grounded and present. He can be with what's actually happening instead of the scary projections, and he can make space for what's actually happening and doesn't feel threatened by that. It's not that you have to be like you're not going to be impacted. It's not that you're not going to not feel anxiety, but you can sit with it, and you've cultivated that capacity to sit with it. Um, and I'm sort of forgot what the original question was.
No, you hit the nail on the head because the
Yeah,
exact follow up was in terms of sitting with it, right? You
yeah,
just touched on the importance of that embodiment and
yeah,
not being overly reactive. And we've said the recurring topic on this podcast of men, unfortunately, whether it's a bottle or certain habits, leaning into things to distract or pacify the realities. Being able to sit with that anxiety, touch on that,
yeah.
and how that embodiment can come about from it, whether it be through breath work or other practices.
Yeah, I have a whole set of intensity practices in what I teach, um, where you're learning to sit with physical intensity. So one of those is like ego eradicator, where you have your arms up at 45 degrees, and we do a breath of fire, and this is a common one in men's work. And it starts to your shoulders start to burn, your chest starts to get fatigued from the breath of fire, which is an intense one, and you learn to open to and sit with that intensity both in the delts and in the chest. um, that's an intensity exercise, so you learn to sit with physical intensity. And the cool thing is, it perfectly maps over into your capacity to sit with relational intensity or emotional intensity. So the more I practice ego eradicator every day and learn to sit longer and longer periods of time, even though my shoulders are burning and all I want to do is quit, the more I do that in my daily practice, the more actually capacity I have to be with her emotional intensity. Um, so I think a big part of embodiment is learning to sit with these intensity exercises. One that a lot of guys in men's work know is a cold plunge. Same thing.
Yeah.
How do you know? But instead of we're coaching them, instead of get them where they get in the cold plunge and they're clenched, and instead of that, we teach them to open to this and not have to do the fast breath to bleed off the energy, and actually learn to open to and sit with the intensity of the cold. And so that's an example that a lot of guys know.
What do you see is lacking in most men in society when it comes to the work that you do and really the topics that we're touching on now? If there were a megaphone and you could reach the influential young men who are in that age
Yeah.
coming into their manhood, what would you tell them that they need, or what wisdom would you give?
Yeah, it's a hard choice to pick one, but I'll do so. I think just stop blaming her. Not because she's not doing stuff that's harmful to the relationship. Not because of that. Not because she's perfect and it's all your fault, but because it's not an empowered position of like, if she would just stop being a crazy bitch, then everything would be fine. Like that's total blame onto her. Well, you need to realize this, guys. The feminine's way of being is largely a reaction to our way of being in the relationship. So if we come with toxicity or lack of connection or emotional capacity, she's going to tighten up, and she's going to more and more exhibit these behaviors of irritability and criticism, lack of interest in sexuality. But a lot of that is reaction to your way of being, usually because you're not being fully relational. So you're either not grounded, or you're not leading, or you're not creating an emotional connection and safety for her. So that's what I would say, guys. It's not about fault. Let's not worry about whose fault this is. Let's talk about what's the solution. You are. You
Mhm.
actually have the full power by changing your way of being and what you bring into the relationship. That will evoke something different in her. So you don't have to demand she's different or hope that she's different or any of that. You can evoke something differently. You have all the power here. And that's what I would try to get through to men. If you can bring better relational skills and masculine leadership into the relationship, you're going to find it gets better. Without her even knowing that she's changing, she's gonna be changing because you're evoking something different in her. So, guys, you're in a powerful place and you have so much that's possible. Even though I get it, you feel befuddled at the moment.
What would you say to single guys who are looking to prep themselves for a relationship? Maybe they've gotten into an age, their career's doing well, and they've
Yeah.
decided, I think I'm ready to take care of more than myself. What words of wisdom would you give to them, or what attributes should they look for in a partner?
Yeah.
Uh oh.
No, I don't want to be trite when I say this, but I mean, the first advice is like the blueprint applies to you very much so, guys. You know, be grounded. And even as like guys who are dating like that, even the first date, that first meeting, like you meet her on the app, whatever the apps are these days, and you walk into that coffee shop and she's sitting there like, can you ground yourself first and just and walk and be very present? And as you say hello, does she feel your groundedness? Like that's one of the ways to become the most attractive is to number one, feel very grounded in that first moment she meets you. She can feel you within the first 30 seconds or less of the date. And
Yeah.
often that goes both ways, but they're even more intuitive than us. So when you can show up grounded, you're gonna instantly create attraction that you might have lost in that first 30 seconds if you're kind of like talking too fast or kind of you feel a little discombobulated rather than just being really grounded and right here. You know,
Mm,
that's one of the biggest things for guys that are dating. You can win in the first 30 seconds or you can lose in the first 30 seconds based on your groundedness. That's
yeah.
one. Number two is leadership. It's not like, well, where do you want to meet? It's like, okay, you live in North Beach, so there's a great coffee shop down there. Let's meet there. Would that work for you? 7:30 sounds good. Um, so you're clear in your direction, you're clear in your communications. All these things are about leadership that you can bring into the dating world. Um, and then, even the third one, emotional connection can happen on a first date. It's the way you ask questions. Like, do you ask horizontal questions, like where are you from, what do you do, blah, like you kind of hop from topic to topic, or do you feel into the first thing that she says and take that deeper? Like, do you show yourself to be a man of depth? Well, that's part of what we're learning here in terms of in a relationship, you're building emotional connection, and you can also do that on a first date as well. Um, these are the kind of things that you can bring into the dating world. In the back of my head, maybe one of my next books is going to be like bringing the blueprint into the dating world. That probably won't happen for a few years, but I've got a few other books I want to write. But all of this applies perfectly.
Yeah. Beyond relationships, what um, benefits would men see in their careers, in their friendships,
Yeah.
by embodying that masculine blueprint?
Yeah. You walk into the meeting room every day. Most guys in corporate. Let's just talk about guys in corporate America. They go to meetings all day, and you come into the meeting, and when you speak, people can feel your groundedness. You're going to feel when you get more grounded and do this embodiment work, for instance, you're going to feel more authoritative. You know, instead of it's like you can just feel the differences of guys. No, 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 no. No. I don't actually agree with that. No, 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 and so they're kind of up here, and versus that guy that's like, okay, hold on, let's think about this for a second. I'm not sure I'm in alignment with you, but I do want to. I want to hear what you have to say. But let me share this. Like it's just an energetic difference into how you interact with others. Leadership, I think that speaks for itself. Like leadership in business. I mean, obviously, everybody knows that it's leadership in relationship they don't understand, but you can bring the same principles in of first having that inner clarity, being attuned to other. I mean, that's so important in relationship, but a leader needs to take in the opinions and needs of their people and not just dictate to others. And so that's a way that it'll benefit you. Your public speaking will be better as you learn to be more grounded and come from a more grounded place, and the ability to create emotional safety. I mean, I think in the last like 5 years ago, Google did a big thing on this about emotional safety on the teams, and the leaders that could create emotional safety for their team members are the ones that had the best retention and productivity. And so these concepts of emotional connection, but more so emotional safety, absolutely apply to the business world. And so I know my career really started to take off because I was in Silicon Valley for a pretty long time before I moved into this realm. But my career took off after I really started to do the work because I was doing the work, and I occurred as more powerful in my working world. So yeah, definitely lots of benefits in one's career.
To any guy that's listening who hears what we're saying and it sounds like a pipe dream. It sounds like, man, the gap between where I am now and where I need to go is just so far. The journey itself seems daunting. What do you tell that guy? What are the first steps that he takes?
Well, I mean, if you're that guy that's like, oh my God, it seems like such a big bite to chew, or I would say you're actually the perfect candidate because you're like you're so emblematic of these ways of being that I'm talking about, that even little changes will make a big difference in your life. And I would say this, if you're somebody that has maybe even done a bunch of work and you're just like, God, it's not sticking, like I'm still getting as reactive, what that probably means is you've got trauma and you haven't addressed it. So it'll always undercut you.
Mm,
So I'd say to those guys, you might explore with a trauma therapist some of the trauma therapy modalities that are out there so you can start to hit this at its most root level. You know, something like EMDR is it's a treatment that's been created for those with PTSD, but a lot of guys have things that are similar to PTSD from their childhood. An overbearing mother can absolutely do that to you. An overbearing father, an angry father, an absent father, um, a mother that was aloof. You know, these all wound us as children. So, if you're really challenged and nothing's working, I'd say you might check out trauma therapy to see if that's blocking you.
a couple questions here. I feel as though we're coming to the end. I had a whole bunch written down. I wanted to make sure I got some creative ones out of the way. Um,
Hmm.
in writing the book, um, or both of your books, what surprised you most that you cultivated about yourself?
Surprised me. Um, I was surprised at how I don't know if it's sort of this combination of therapeutic, but also my self learning to write about these things. You know, I spent many years observing the patterns and then trying to coalesce them down into some like concrete principles that dudes can understand. Um, doing that, it exposed the places where I wasn't. I mean, the principle I'm saying I think is a correct one and a useful one, but there were places where I wasn't fully embodying that. So it shone the light on me that I still had my work to do to embody, you know, some of the principles that I was talking about. Even though the principle was the right one and a useful one, I wasn't there yet, and so it really exposed me to myself where I wasn't fully embodying them. It was an amazing, amazing learning experience.
Yeah, no, I could only imagine, and I would say for most of us, if not all of us, I'd venture all of us are consistently growing, consistently working, and we always do have work to do. And I'm happy where I'm at, but I'm happily ambitious for the next level of what I'm
Yeah,
capable of.
I'll bet.
Uh, before I ask my last question, GS, I want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to connect with you, follow you, get your books, learn more of your work, and even
Yeah,
work with you if they are at that point and they're ready to really get some hands on services. So, what are
yeah.
the best links and locations that folks can go to?
Yeah, the website's obviously the obvious one, gsyoungblood.com. And what you'll see there is information about all my offerings. Always, I'd say point people to Amazon to start with the book. But if you get to that and want to go deeper, my relationship repair boot camp is a live online program I do. It's 12 weeks, 10 to 12 men. Very powerful work that we do together. It's turned out to be a really great modality. I have a workshop, and I don't know when this will come out. Uh, Ted, but you know, I have a workshop mid October here in San Francisco Bay Area. It's going to be powerful. We're going to do some powerful work and also learn how to lead in the bedroom as well. There's a little bit of a kind of a flavor of that will include the other workshops in Mexico and coming up in February. So go to the website and you can see the workshops and online courses and all the other things that I'm offering. You can also go to YouTube, of course, search my name, and then Instagram, GS Youngblood, MIR. You can see little clips of my videos and me talking about different topics.
Fantastic. And I'll have those links in the show notes below. And leading in the bedroom, we should have led with that. We buried the lead.
Yeah,
um,
powerful work we're going to do in that workshop. I'm so excited to do it.
well, I that's the perfect tease for folks to kind of continue to push through those links right down in the description or in the show notes. The last question here, GS, is what is something that has happened to you or something you've seen that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
Lots, because I see so many examples every day with my clients. But if I pulse, I think the my own journey that I mentioned before of getting divorced and seeing, man, when you don't bring leadership and groundedness, and if you don't know how to build emotional connection, you're screwed. You cannot be in a relationship and not know how to do those things. Eventually, your woman will shut down. And so I realized, I saw the contrast of how toxic, what toxicity you can create by not bringing those things. And I, in my relationship now, which is a long-term one with Lee, I can see how I can evoke different things, just through my own way of being, which I said multiple times. So it is my best answer to your question of just like seeing how I can evoke whatever's going on. It's usually something that I helped evoke through my own way of being. And so I want to just leave everybody with that message of empowerment. You can evoke what you want. You can evoke what you want in this relationship. You have the power.
Absolutely. Amen. GS Youngblood, acclaimed author of the book, The Masculine in Relationship. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to recap some of the gems that you left along the way in case some of our listeners were driving or perhaps they're working out while listening to the podcast. But you started like there had to be a better way. And I want to make sure to drive that message home for a lot of guys who are listening who might feel stuck or their relationship might not be where there is a better way. And it's by cultivating these relationship skills, embodying that masculine blueprint, getting grounded, leaning into your leadership and creating an emotional safe space for you and your partner. Those three things, starting with the embodiment. To get grounded, you need to have the practice. What does your daily discipline look like? How are you regulating your nervous system and getting it settled so you're not reactive, defensive, and sensitive? What physical practices are you doing to be more relaxed with the anxiety and heal from traumas that you might have had? Leadership. Leadership starts with inner clarity. Remember when GS said that if you're failing at your leadership, perhaps you haven't cultivated the clarity within appropriately. And that, again, takes time and cultivating that silence with yourself. Feel her, receive her, and make space for her. If you're reactive and you're defensive, you're not creating an emotional safe space and you're not allowing her to express herself and be understood and felt. And that is the block right there. So being able to sit in that anxiety and make her feel seen, heard, and felt and receive it and make the space for it can make a world of difference for you. And it's not masculine if you're fighting with your woman. GS did not stutter when he said that. And you could sit with the intensity in your physical capacity as well as your emotional and relational capacity and stop blaming her. If there was one title or one nugget from this whole episode, it's stop blaming her. You have the power, men. Cultivate your relational skills and elevate yourself. Embody being grounded, leading more, and creating a safe emotional space. GS Youngblood, thank you so much. To the audience, thank you for making it to the end. I'm going to ask you to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for a new episode each and every single week. And of course, don't forget to share this with a friend and leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing, because the only way we improve is with your feedback. Guys, thank you so much. And as we always say at the end of the episode, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain, but you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.